So my name is Miru for those who don't know me. I'm sure you've seen my face, just didn't know my name. I come to the Thursday morning pottery class with Curry, and I should thank everybody that's here, that's not here, that has taken me through this journey, pushing me probably to actually take the independent study and finish it. So I called my study terra sigillata. If you all want to say the word once, terra sigillata. Everybody looks at me and goes, terra what? So terra sigillata, and I called it exploring methods to amplify tactility with traditional technique, where the traditional technique is the use of terra sig. That's what we're going to call it from now. And I worked on the independent study from the session that ran May, June, and then I completed, school was done, and so I completed my study through June and some of July and some of August. So I'm not going to take too much time describing terra sig, but we want to know what it is that we are talking about when we say terra sig. It is not a technique of today. It dates back almost 6,000 years, and I will just run through very briefly on the history of terra sig, beginning with what the word itself means. Terra, we all know from terracotta that it has to do something with earth, clay, and sigillata means seal, but it does not mean sealing as in sealing a surface with something, but rather from, sorry, I wanted to show everything big. I don't know how much you can see from the picture here. It has an embossed surface. So of the kind of seal that the kings would have used when they had to emboss their seal from their ring, those official kind of seals. So it simply means the use of clay to produce surfaces which have an embossed nature to them. And with my next few slides, I'll show you how terra sig progressed, beginning from the Greeks, then the Egyptians, and then the Gauls, and all that. I'll quickly run through it. So what I say here is 4,500 BC, Egyptians used carbon to create the color black. So we have to think of very basic use of earth, the clay, and fire. And what colors can we produce from that? One basic color was black. So they used carbon to produce black. We all know that. And then came the Minoans in about 3000 BC, and they used manganese for black. So already there was this progress happening. And then the Greeks, they worked a lot on terra sig, and they were able to figure out this technique where they played with fire and the presence or the absence of oxygen to create red and black. And then around 1000 BC to about 400 AD, the Aretine and the Samian ware, which is all of Gaul and Italy, that is where terra sig ware saw its glorious days. Several pigments were used to produce more than 2 colors, including yellows and oranges and reds and blacks at the same time when one pot was firing. And then, as we know now from pottery from Peru, from southern America, Peru or the Aztecs or Mexico, the ware that comes from there, all that is the more contemporary styles that have evolved from 6,000 years now. And one notable thing is that the word terra sigillata was first used or mentioned within the United States not until 1908. So just a few examples of how good they were at the technique of using low fire to create probably 2 colors only, but these wares have stood the test of time, and they are so good looking. So we have the Ubaid civilization, which is between 6,500, or should I say 6,500, like you guys said, to 4,800 BC, which is present-day Iran. And I have two parts here to show you where they were able to use geometric patterns with much ease. And then they could also do their abstract animal form. Then we move on to another civilization, which is the Egyptians, 3200 BC. And this part here, I believe, to get the two-tone, what they did was they smothered just the top. The rest was protected by sand to get the carbon to act on only one portion of the pot, thereby giving them two colors. And then came the Greeks, who got really, really good at this, where they did the process of reduction to create black iron oxide, whereas if that reduction did not happen completely, anywhere there was uneven reduction, you saw red. So they figured that out, and soon enough, they were able to create more than two colors in one firing by first reducing and then oxidizing, either ways, whichever ways they did it. And it is said that they used on the outside of their ware, and the kind of clay they used was had a high content of iron oxide, iron in it, and that's what helped during the reduction and the oxidation process. And then we come to the Minoans. They lived, so that is kind of Europe, Italy, and all that, and down there is the island of Crete. That's where they lived. They flourished, and they were here between 2000 and 1450 BC, and they were able to create more than two colors. They were able to create yellows, oranges, reds, blacks, and white on their ware. For black, they used manganese. For the white, they used the clay body itself, a kaolin clay, which is a plasticky clay, and the reddish orange is from iron oxide. And then slowly, as time progressed, the Etruscan ware came by, which was made by the Greeks. And this was around 575 to 550 BC, this particular cup. And I don't know how much you can see from there, but you can see that it gleams kind of blackish silver. And this ware came out when silverware, in its true pure form, which is black and shiny, not white and shiny like we know it now, hit the market, and the potters were trying to make pottery to kind of look like it, because not everybody could buy silver. So you could still buy something that looked like it. And so this was probably the height of their production, where they made these shiny black ware. And then between the 1st and the 2nd century AD, that is probably terracage at its best. You see how glossy the surface is. Very, very, very refined clay was used, and the pottery was very durable. It was low fired, and this was the best time for terracage in the world. And then slowly it went out of vogue. Metals came in. Pottery ware was not considered as important anymore, as exciting anymore, I guess. So that's when the world forgot how to do this anymore. So a lot of research came up in the early 1900s, no, I should say the early 1800s, to figure out how the Greek ware looked so glossy. What did they do? They thought it was some kind of a slip or a glaze that they used, but it took about 100 years or more, or even a century maybe, to figure out the exact recipe of how terracage was made. So I'm just going to tell you a few things, a few people that were important during this discovery. So 1858, Samuel Birch, he was a British Egyptologist and antiquarian who started studying a lot about all these different wares, from early Minoans to, or even further down to what we know, what they knew till then, and he put it together in a book. And then came Carl Fischer from Bavaria, who discovers terracage in 1908. He discovers it, he describes it, and they're still calling it probably a slip or a glaze. Then comes Theodor Schumann, a scientist in Germany, and the war is happening, and through the years of the Second War, he finally discovers how to make terracage from highly refined clay. And then in the US, Joseph Veach Noble, he writes several books. He is basically just a self-trained ceramic archaeologist, and in 1965, he writes a book on the technique to recreate terracage, which is also published. From there, the word terracage appears, the different recipes appear, and people are trying terracage on their ware again. So for my study, I had asked Patrick to help me out with finding somebody who knew a lot about terracage, and Pete Pinnell was one person that he had just recently heard at a NCCA conference in January, I think, and Patrick wrote to him, and Pete Pinnell sent me his entire talk, which spanned about an hour. And I don't know how long have I been talking, hopefully not too long, and he goes through this entire history with images and this and that and whatnot. It's like one whole big hour that he talks, which I tried to concise in 5 minutes. That is Pete Pinnell's teapot, and like it says here, it is red earthenware, and it has been brushed with terracage, and he gives it a patina finish. He makes a patina with 1 part of Gersley borate and 1 part of colorant, and then it's a thin wash over a bisqued ware. Not like how I would be talking to you more about how I do my terracage on my green ware when it is bone dry. So the patina itself goes on the bisqued ware, and that tends to show your textures very well, I believe. So I thank Pete Pinnell for all his guidance through his emails and his talk. This is basically Pete Pinnell's terracage recipe. I can give all of you a copy. I had requested that we make a few copies of the terracage recipe, so anybody that's interested can walk home with one. It sounds all very mysticky and difficult, but the more I jumped into it, it was easy. It just took time and a little effort. So basically, it's just water and clay. You could use any clay, but from what the discussions we have had, Patrick and me, he said plasticky clays are what, ball clays, that's what they're called, are more suitable for terracage than some other clays which have a lot of grit in them and other things added. So you have water to clay, 2 parts to 1 part. And then what do you do? Here comes the main, the most important part of making your terracage, which makes it work. So the clay particles are all held together, they're all holding on to each other for dear life, and you add a deflocculant. What we use here in the studio that we have is sodium silicate. It's like a thick, viscous liquid. We even used it one day to create a very different technique in the Thursday morning class, if you remember. So you add a tiny bit, literally it was a tiny bit, maybe quarter teaspoon maybe, into the water, and the deflocculant comes by and now attacks every part of this clay body and separates out each particle into its finest size, micron sizes. Now all the clay particles are in big, small, medium, small, smallest sizes, and what happens naturally when something like that happens in a solution is that the biggest particles want to go down, and that's what happens. The deflocculation happens where all the big particles start settling down. Sometimes you need about 2 days for the entire deflocculation to happen, and you have your thinnest, smallest particles on the surface. And you can see this separation of layers. So you let it settle, literally you let it settle, don't touch it, don't keep it where there will be a vacuum running a whole day or a AC running a whole day. Literally keep it where nobody will come by, nobody will be walking, children won't be jumping. I thought of all these things. And then you siphon off the top without disturbing the bottom. You do not want any of that bottom because those are big particles, and if you have any of the big particles in your terracage, then when you burnish, the sheen will not happen because you have big particles and then you have tiny particles. They don't like to be on the same surface. Then, this is your terracage. Sadly, you have to throw off the rest of the sludge. That bothers me till date. I'm still trying to find out what can be done with the sludge. And then you measure the specific gravity. That is the critical thing to do to see if you will get a good sheen when you burnish your pot after having applied terracage. Measuring it is a very neat and easy technique. You just measure 100 grams of water on a really sensitive scale, mark how far the water sat, dump it off, and add your terracage just until that mark. The number you get is divided by the weight of water, and if you get anywhere between 1.15, you did it. So I won't say I got 1.15. Mine was around 1.21. So I added little water sometimes. If it was too thick, if it was too thin, I let it evaporate for another 1 day, hoping the specific gravity will increase. I did okay, I would say. And then you apply 2 or 3 coats on your greenware, and then you burnish it. It's your bone dry greenware. You would wonder how you could do that and then polish it. How does it not break? It surprised me too. I was hugging it and I was polishing it, but it didn't break on me. So it's interesting how this works. Okay.
Would it work on bisque?
I did a few just to see if it will work on bisque, and I asked you to use it on your chickens also the other day.
Oh, that's
yes, yes. So this is just pictorial. Yes, there would have been bigger pictures. I'm sorry. So that is the water that has been measured. There's a mark right here. The deflocculant is being added to the water and mixed well, and then slowly you add your clay in, slowly, and you give the clay time to kind of absorb into the water and settle. And then it begins to settle. You would have seen lines running through if you had seen a bigger picture, which means the deflocculation has started. And then you see 2 separate layers here. I don't know how much you can see. There's one layer here and a clearer layer on top. The top is what we need. So you siphon off the top without getting any of the bottom sludge. And then you apply 3 coats, put your pot on a wheel, slow speed, and start brushing it from top to bottom. Run your other finger on the top as the terracage is drying slowly. It should neither be wet nor should it change color and become white. If it becomes too white, you cannot sheen it. If it's too wet, it will stick on your finger. So test it with your finger. If it's not sticking on, if it still looks gray but is not shiny and wet, it's the right time to sheen it. With a plastic bag, grocery bag, with this part of your hand, with simply your fingers. Some people use the back of a spoon. Some people use a stone. Come up with any number of ideas. Everybody has their way, and that's what it looks like. After 3 coats, it's been burnished, and it's nice and shiny, ready to go for a firing.
You burnish in between coats?
You could, but it is not necessary. Some people do it this way, some people do it that way. Through all my readings, I see that either ways it works. The idea is not to let it dry out, because then you can't burnish. You have to go with another layer of terracage on it and then shine it.
Do you fire low fire?
Everything that's out there is from our kilns.
Okay.
So no reduction, sadly, and it is 06 and then fired back to 6 if I added our clear glaze. So if I did not, some of the pieces did not go through the second glaze burning, so which means I'm not still low range, because 06 is not considered low. 04, 02, people do all that. The sheen is lost 50%. That's the only thing. So if you don't mind losing the sheen, yes, you can.
Food safe?
Food safe. So these are my colorants. So me and Patrick, we started out making 2 batches, one with OM4 clay, which is a ball clay we use here, and the XX Sagar clay, which is also a ball clay. So I started with 2 different ball clays just for fun to see if they would react differently, work differently for me. My favorite seems to be the XX Sagar, Patrick. I don't know if I ever told you. And I added, for green, this doesn't look green. It looks green on the first firing till 06. But cone 6 changes the green to a kind of tannish brown, which is still pretty. And Patrick tells me if I add more green chrome oxide, it will stay green. I did not get to that point, but that would be something I'll try in the future. And that, like it looks, is black. So in my terracage, 1 cup of terracage, I add black mason stain, as simple as that. The same black mason stain we use for making our black slips. Correct, Patrick?
Did you use a teaspoon for each?
Yes, literally. For a cup of terracage, I added a teaspoon. The only difficult part with making these colorants is that the terracage is such fine particles of clay, and the mason stain or the oxides or the carbonates you add are big particles, and they don't want to go into solution. So with each sample I made, I had to use the immersion blender several times to keep it in solution. Sometimes if I was gone for 2 days and I came back, they would all settle on the bottom. I would have to do the immersion blender thing again. There is something you can add, Gum C, to the terracage if you want your colorant to stay in solution. I have not tried that out yet. Then I tried out 2 colors which we did not carry in the studio, a teal, and all my samples are out there also if you want to pass it around. Do you see the sample of colorants? Yeah. And the teal is a pretty color. I like it. And the turquoise, I think, was probably a big hit amongst everybody who looked at my pots. These were 2 different mason stains we ordered. And then to get a pure white, terracage is not white. It is off-white, which is very nice. But if you want pure white, you add tin. And then I have a purplish red. I think Patrick has had better success with using the Crocus Martis. Yes, Crocus Martis is what it's called, and that added to your terracage gives a reddish color. I have not gotten it to be really red or purple. It's still a dull orange for me. And then a blue is the cobalt carbonate that we use in the studio as well, which is a very pretty blue. And then finally is my control, as I call it, which is the terracage itself. So you can see the difference between the white and the terracage. So now coming down to what I actually did. So why I ended up looking into terracage for my independent study is that I think in the last 5-6 years that I've been here with Art Alliance, I've always loved working with slips and then doing sgraffito on it. But there was something missing when I added glaze over it and I lost the warmth in the pot. It was not making me completely happy. And accidentally, when I was trying to make these cups for a cousin of mine, she wanted Aztec designs. I was looking into Aztec designs, into brushes, how to make these intricate designs and all. Lynn, who was sitting on the other side, said, you could use terracage, you know, your textures will show through. And I looked at her and like, yes, you can use terracage on that? She said, yeah. I said, I thought it was only for raku. No. I was like, really? Oh my God, have I been missing out on this? Because we have those buckets sitting there quietly. Nobody even looks at them. We have terracage. We have red art terracage, which is a red colored terracage in simple words. But none of us actually use it. And it's so easy and simple to use. So that's where I said, okay, this is what I want to find out more about. So I started, the first things I did, even before I started my independent study, I was going to do the independent study, but I had already started working with porcelain, and I was loving it. Like many people said, ugh, I hate porcelain. I was loving it, maybe because it was plastic, more plastic than the other clays we use in the studio, and I have always loved red earthenware, or what is it called? What red is it called? Earthen red, right? So I have always found it very easy to work with it. So I made my first two pieces, one with porcelain and one with earthen red. And from my buckets of porcelain slip, I took out some slip, put it into a small bottle that I had just bought, and I was able to do, can somebody pass out the big earthen red bowl? I was able to very easily use my slip, my own slurry slip from my stinky bucket to do the slip work on the earthen red, which was bone dry. And then I said, okay, now let's try terrassage on it. And I did. So I applied red art terrassage on it, and I burnished it, and it came out fabulous. I was so excited the day it happened. So if the big red bowl that's being passed around, the slip that I've used is the porcelain slip, and it is an earthen red pot. I have just one band of white, not white terrassage on the outside. The rest is covered with red art terrassage.
Covered the earthen red with red terrace.
So I made my bowl, let it dry. Then I did my slip trailing, and in about 5 minutes it dries out too. Then I brushed several coats of the red art, shined it, and then played a little bit more on the other side to give it a white band. So I have alternative red, white, red happening on the underside. Many people ask, why did you do so much on the underside? It should be on this side. But I think that's the that's when a potter is successful, when a pot is picked up, flipped around, and they look at what you did on the underside. So unless you tell them you're a person who does the underside, they're not going to look at the underside. It's usually pick it up, touch the glaze on the inside, and then back it goes. So I have few.
Your porcelain slip that you're using, is that a cone 6 porcelain?
Yes, it is a cone 6 porcelain. Yeah, and we have it here.
What was this fired to?
The same. It's been fired only one. No, it's only been fired once. Yes.
And so that's why you can see the beautiful satin
Yes.
finish on it.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's only had the lower.
Yes.
fiber.
Yeah.
That's lovely to see.
I have two other pieces that I also did in the similar fashion. They are also out there. And there's a mug that I did which had cobalt carbonate on top, and then I did the green chrome oxide on the bottom. The first firing, it looked blue and green. But after that, second firing, it became blue. The blue retains, so that is good news for us. Blue and tan, but I still love the tan. It's out there too, if anybody's interested. So this was one method I used, and then I went on to, that's the turquoise, which is also out there. And then the second method that I tried was to do shellac resist, because one day I stepped in and everybody in Saturday class was talking about what Ben had done, and he had this beautiful tall picture that's been sitting there that got laced today. So your spot is cleared for a tall vase. And he'd done this geometric pattern, and all he had done was shellac resist and wipe off. Oh my God, that really excited me. So I wanted to see what that would do for me with terrassage. So I did. So the first piece that went around, that is shellac resist. Yes, this is shellac resist. So you can feel the surface. You see it's up and down. So I just went while drawing a design on it. You like your design, you stop, and then you either shellac between your lines or outside your lines, that's up to you. Then you wipe with not a very coarse sponge and not a very fine sponge. You want clay to come off, so an in-between sponge. Have clean water, squeeze out the water, and Gently wipe, be careful, you can break it. And then feel the surface. If you think you have enough depth, good, go on to the next. So then I did 2 colors of terrassage. I did a red art terrassage and the black terrassage. The only problem I had was I think I had given it too many wipes, so the shellac wasn't resisting the terrassage. I was hoping to have a clean white surface with a red background. That didn't happen. Terrassage wanted to stick most of everywhere, so I had to do a little bit of wiping off so that I would have a red and white pattern. So I have to work on that, but I found a way. So instead of doing shellac resist on your bone dry and then painting it with terrassage, if you paint it with terrassage, make your design, shellac it, and then wipe off, your design will stay with the terrassage on your pot. So that is what I did with this part here, which is also out there. I went the flip way. I brushed several different colors of terrassage, drew a pattern, and then wiped off, and it stayed.
In your shellac resist, did you use oil-based shellac or water-based?
The only shellac that I know of.
Because you can buy an oil-based shellac, and then when you wipe off, it doesn't wipe off with the water. If you buy a water-based shellac, then you're wiping off some of the shellac at the bottom.
Teresa, what did you guys use in your Saturday class? Do you know if that is water or oil?
My guess is, yeah, so if you can look at it, you can see if it's
Well, the other thing is if it doesn't come off with water, you can clean it, you
right.
need alcohol.
Yeah, if you
well,
need
it's-
alcohol to clean it, right, or turpentine or something like that. then it's-
Yeah, that's what we do. So that would be oil-based. Okay, maybe I wiped too much then. Okay, so, and the third technique was just trying to be contemporary and be one with everybody. So I used Laura's Amaco underglazes. On my bone dry cups, I used the underglaze to make all kinds of fun lines, and I let it sit for about a week. And then one day I came and used all my different colored terrassages to fill in the spaces, and then it went for firing. And for one of them, I used clear on the inside just to make it functional, because that is my future goal, to make terrassage pots functional without losing the warmth they have in them. I don't want it to be glaze. So that's what I did. All of these are porcelain clay bodies. I used the Amaco black underglaze just to see if terrassage would in any way interact or make those lines hazy, but nothing happens because this is just clay, so it's not going to bother underglaze. It's not glaze that it's going to react with. So, and then I filled it with the colored terrassage everywhere at the bone dry stage, and then the insides are red because I brushed with red art, and I fired them once. This has been fired twice. They're also out there for you to take a look at.
I have a question. You said when you did the firing once, it's still food safe, right? With the terrace?
It is always food safe.
Okay, so no matter.
So all the ware that I showed you from years back, centuries back, were always used as a wine something for liquids mostly. So they have always been food safe. There is no addition of lead anywhere. So I wouldn't, there's no reason to think they are not food safe, right, Patrick?
That's correct. The glazes are, and don't need to think about things because the clay is always going to be somewhat porous, but the terrassage lead itself is not in any way toxic in the finished form. It may stain, the piece may be more porous than if you use a glaze, but it's safe to use.
Yeah, that's my understanding. We all use glaze just because we want a teapot to be a teapot. But if we think about Pete Pinnell's teapot, it is terrassage and it has a patina on the outside. So it will hold liquids, if not for 100 years, for a day or two, definitely. So, yeah. Yes, that's what I think. Yeah. Yeah. So, so ever since I've been doing terrassage, which is not for very long, 2-3 months only, summer makes life feel very extended, I think. That's what I'm going through probably with 2 kids at home. These are few inspirations that I wish you could see these up big, but I would like you guys to later come take a look at her work. Her name is Sumi Won Dason, and she lives and teaches in Lakewood, Colorado. She does pit firing and sagger firing. Pit firing is where you use a pit to fire your items. You use wood, sawdust. Some people use coffee grounds, bananas, copper wires. All of these give different hues to the pot as the firing goes on. And the pit fire doesn't take more than 30 minutes from start to finish, and then you let it cool. This is low fire, basically. And you could do reduction and oxidation both. If you did a sagger firing, a sagger is nothing but some form of an enclosure into which your pot will be, so that you deplete all the oxygen and you have reduction happening, and you add sawdust for the carbon and all that wonderful stuff. So coming back to her, she makes these wonderful pots where she calls this sea cavalry. It has like a seahorse on it, and she coil builds them like the olden days, and she burnishes the patterns, which is painted using terracage. And then it is smoke fired. So the pot itself becomes completely black. The terracage has a grayish contrast on top of the black, shiny pot. That's one more. So you can see how she's playing with the reduction, where you have these orangish hues and the rest is black. She calls this portrait of the artist. Same thing, coil built, burnished patterns, painted with terracage, and smoke fired. And one more person that I've been really inspired is Michael Weisner. I don't know why, something about Colorado and the Southwest, I think. There is something that they always bump into these beautiful techniques of the olden days. And he lives, and his studio is also in Woody Creek, Colorado. That's him making these days, very recently, making these beautiful, he calls it patterns from nature. And you guys should go look him up and see the wonderful work he's doing with just 1 or 2 tools, like the end of a blade. And he does repetitive patterns on his pots. He uses clay from where he lives. He goes up the mountains digging for clay, cleans it up, and makes these wares. Michael Weisner, Wisner. This is what he was making probably 5-7 years ago, but very recently, this is the ware he's making. I'm sorry I can't show it to you big. And the color of the clay he starts with is usually either white or tan, and he uses the same techniques to make them look red or black. He adds iron oxide to make them red, or smokes them to make them black. And these, I think, interest me more because they remind me of the ware from Southern America. And the middle one is all black because he uses graphite. He uses powdered graphite that he then smears on his pots, on his bone dry pots. And then he paints them with terracage as well to give the double hue of gray on black. And then the rest, of course, he makes his own, he calls it slips, I think, his own slips to make red and black. So that's all that I was able to accomplish in a short period of time, given that our session runs only 8 weeks. And when it is the end of school, and when you had already committed to do something else at school, which takes all your time, this is how much I could achieve. But I'm very happy with what I was able to achieve with Patrick's help. And I've annoyed him a lot over text because he said you could text me. I've texted him a lot. So thank you, Patrick. So what next? I want to try reduction firing and stagger firing. I want to see this beauty of red and black happening with such a simple control of oxygen. I have also tried one piece of painting terracage over a burnished pot. I need to go take a peek in the kiln room to see if it's out. And I think patinas on bisque sige would be a good idea for the studio itself to try, just to accentuate the textures that many people are able to create here. It's not a difficult thing to do, I would say. And then I do want to unravel the art of kitchenware. So that would be quite, I don't know, not hard. There'll be a lot of reading up to do, looking up to do, maybe visiting places to see how you cook on a pot. You get so used to throwing thinner and thinner, and you have to throw thick pots now. Yeah.
Jimmy Von Dasu has a book on kitchenware.
Okay.
Yes, you might want
Do you
to
have the
check it
book? Do you have the book? You've seen
out.
the
It's
book.
home.
Okay, thank you.
I can get the title to you.
Okay. So, acknowledgements. My family, of course, yes. And Art Alliance, everybody that's here, not here. Patrick, thank you. Liz, thank you. And many of the instructors, I don't think any instructors are here, yeah, but many of them let me stay on during their class hours. Yeah, so thank you. Liz, I mentioned you already. Patrick, thank you for brainstorming sometimes. And Pete Pinnell for sharing his talk and his recipe, letting us use his recipe. By the way, his recipe is on any site, everywhere on the internet. Everybody uses it. He is that generous. And my pottery friends from Thursday morning class, woohoo, and Curry, yes, I mean it. You guys, your love and encouragement kept me going. And the few websites that I took the pictures out of were Ceramic Arts Network and Ceramic Arts Daily for showing how to make terracage. And that's it. Thank you.